What is up, podcast family? I have an important announcement to share with you. Now, as you may know, psychedelic coaching is on the rise. But let's be honest, working with many of these substances can bring legal and ethical challenges. And that's why cannabis, which I talk about often, is the ultimate game changer. It's legal in most places, incredibly powerful as a tool for transformation, and completely underappreciated as a psychedelic medicine. Now, in my Coach with Cannabis certification program, you'll master the tools to guide clients safely, confidently, and effectively through transformative cannabis experiences. This is your chance to get ahead of the curve and step into the future of psychedelic coaching. Now, as of today, doors for the Coach with Cannabis program are now open, but we only have spots for 20 people on this initial run. So if you're interested and you're feeling the call within, head down to the show notes and apply today and see if you qualify for a spot in this revolutionary program. Now back to the show. Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. As you guys may have heard on my episode 200 solo cast last week, my favorite part of this podcast is meeting individuals that once I meet, I truly have no idea how I've gone my whole life not knowing. The truth is that the relationships in our life are designed to act as mirrors, allowing us to see the beauty in individuality and also to see ourselves in ways we otherwise couldn't. Today's guest on the show is a man who fits all the aforementioned details to a T. He is a certified psychedelic medicine practitioner, is a microdosing psilosopher, great pun by the way, and is the founder of Entheosholistics, which is a company dedicated to reconnecting its customers and clients to their grateful nature through fungi-based nutraceutical microdoses. In this episode, we let the divine take the lead, and our intention is that this episode opens you up to some new perspectives and leaves you feeling more connected to your higher self than ever before. So please, give me a big hand and welcoming my man, Austin West, onto the show. Austin West, my man. Dude, am I excited to be here with you today. You know, as I mentioned in the intro, Austin and I have a lot of common shared interests. You know, we were just talking off record about crypto and, you know, the taxes are voluntary movement, the sovereignty movement, all these kind of things, man. So I know we're going to get into a lot of juicy stuff in this episode. But first, man, how you doing today? So grateful to be here with you, man.
Oh, I'm doing so great, brother. Appreciate you having me on.
Heck yeah, dude. Me too. So, bro, you know, I'm curious for you, right? How does someone like yourself first get interested in the psychedelic world? Because you were sharing with me you're in finance, or you were in finance for a long time. And typically what I find is that people that resonate with finance, math, etc., like typically they're not the people that are like, oh, I love psychedelics when they're like 16, right? It's usually the painters, the musicians, etc. So like, was that the case for you? Did that come later on in life? Was it something you were open to? I love hearing this part of everyone's journey, man. It's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned the being 16, I was definitely one of the finance bros doing a bunch of coke at 16. I wasn't in the psychedelic field at that time, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, psychedelics kind of found me on an accidental, was not expecting it. I was even deterrent of it when it was first offered to me, which is hilarious thinking about all the times I would snort anything out of anybody's hand from any bag from any stranger. I remember memories of being in Vegas, just looking around a room for somebody that looked like they're rolling just to go buy a pill off them. Right. It's like, it's wild. And then I remember the first time I was offered mushrooms, I was heading to the beach. I was living in San Diego at the time. We're going to the beach with a bunch of my friends. And these are the same friends that I would get blacked out drunk with 3 days a week, you know, just living that numb life. Mm-hmm. And, one of my buddies offered me a mushroom chocolate, and I remember being really resistant. I'm like, dude, no, I heard those things kind of make you lose your mind. I'm good, man. I'll stick to the alcohol, you know? And after some pushing, I mean, I'd lived with this kid for 4 years, so he was a good buddy. After some pushing, he ended up getting me to eat a chocolate. I think it was 250 milligrams. And at that point in my life, I was really depressed, really anxious. I was purposeless in my career. I mean, I was making $500,000 a year and I was miserable.
Hmm.
I had the women, right? Not the relationships, the women. And I was
Yeah.
empty there. Like my life wasn't great. I was fraught with like a sleepless panic all the time. And then all of a sudden I ate this mushroom chocolate and my entire shit got flipped upside down. I remember being at the beach and feeling, it's like poetic in a way. It's like I felt the sun on my skin for the first time. And all of that mental chatter and rumination, right? Like the depressive thoughts of the past, the inability to accept, the fearful thoughts of the future, all of my anxiety, they were just gone. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm just here with my friends and in nature. And it's like I went out in the ocean and I remember feeling the water around me like, oh my God, this feels like the best thing ever. And I was just really immersed into the present experience. And then everything opened up for me from there, right? You know, within a couple of weeks of that date, started microdosing regularly. And then all of a sudden I found my teacher I worked with for 3 years, which led to all the experiences and the eye and the bufo and on and on. But I did not find these medicines, psychedelics. They definitely found me in the most surprising way for where I was in that period of my life.
Dude, so amazing, man. You know, my buddy had a saying about cannabis anyway, and he was like, you know how you know if you're a real stoner? Cannabis finds you in places that you shouldn't have it, right? Like I actually went to El Salvador earlier last year. And of course, like El Salvador doesn't fuck around when it comes to drugs, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just going to go cold turkey. It's all good. Used to doing this, to do it every week. So I just went there, brought tobacco, you know, and that was it. And we get there. Actually, the same student I was telling you about from the Mighty Morphin Sovereign Rangers, my Telegram group, she ends up hitting me up. She's like, hey, I don't know if I've told you, but I'm from El Salvador. Like, check out this place, that place, this place. If you need someone to find you cannabis, here's the number. And I'm like, no way. And there's a part of me that's just like, yeah, I want to smoke a joint in a place like this. Because again, in America, right? Like, I'm so grateful it's legal. But there was kind of this like, ooh, taboo feeling when you'd smoke it somewhere you weren't supposed to. So of course I had to check out the, the nation's quality. And so I got some, and it was pretty much like Mexican brick cannabis, but it felt really cool. It was
We're all familiar.
Yeah. It was a really, meaningful joint to smoke out there because, I really feel like, and I can understand or empathize with why El Salvador kind of made it so ridiculous with drugs right now. Because when you're the murder capital of the world, you got to let your polarity shift completely the other way before you can find the middle ground. I don't discount them for, or judge them for making it illegal, but I do enjoy connecting with natural plants, no matter what imaginary line I'm on. So it's pretty funny how that works. And, very similar to you, like, psychedelics were something that found me over and over again. So I totally understand that. And it's interesting that they find you, at least in my experience, as well as yours that you just shared, they find you at exactly the right moment too. Almost the moment where like, if you just keep going down the path you're going to go down, there's nothing good's going to come from it. And they kind of check you before you wreck yourself, for sure.
Yeah, man, they're arbiters of truth. I mean, that's my entire message around them, whether it's microdosing or a macrodose journey. Like psychedelics are arbiters of truth.
Yeah.
And most people, it's like that. I always think of that scene from A Few Good Men where he's screaming, you can't handle the truth. It's like, that's what a lot of people are screaming themselves. And so all of a sudden you're confronted with this truth and it's like, oh, that's a little too much for me.
Yeah.
If you're accepting of that truth, man, it can open up a whole lot for you.
Yeah. It's like psychedelics take away the you can't handle the part. So it's just what's left,
Yeah.
Like you better be able to handle it because it's coming,
Yep. Whether you want it or not.
So funny, man. One thing I'm curious on, because I know you work a lot with men and whatnot, and this is definitely how it applied to my life. And I've asked some other, people that work with men about this, and it seems to be a going theory. It's gaining a lot of correlation anyway in my world, which is the fact that we are missing rites of passage, right? As human beings alone, let alone men. But since we're men, we'll talk to the man side. But, I think a lot of men are finding psychedelics kind of almost maybe not take the place of, because in a lot of cultures they were part of the rites of passage, but they kind of are a really powerful stand-in in a world that is not prioritized the importance of what those types of rituals mean. Have you found something similar in your own life, but also the men you've worked with too?
Yeah, for a lot of the men I've held space for, they're in their 30s, late 20s, 30s, and 40s. And our first mushroom experience ends up being the rites of passage, right? They feel that boy become a man. And even if it's not the full transition, you recognize that you've been living in the boy until you confront these parts of yourselves in a 3, 4, or 5 gram hero's dose journey, right? Yeah. And that was true for me as well. It's like we look at our current culture and what do we have built in as rites of passage? Driver's license. I mean, for females, it's a little different, right? Like they get their moon, and that's a biology based rites of passage. But even the way that society looks at that, it's like shaming it, guilting it, and hide it, and don't come out, and it's even that's gross. And so how women have their rites of passage, it's been completely manipulated based on the view of the patriarchy. Not that I love using that word, but we have a very masculine society, right? Yeah. And then the masculine side of things, because we have nothing built in, what does it end up being? Who can fuck the most chicks? Who can party the hardest? Who can do the most drugs? Who can drink the longest and the latest? Who can be the biggest bully? And so because we don't have these rites of passage experiences built into our youth, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, when these things should happen, it ends up manifesting in very shadowy and dark ways because we're not being led into that experience. And it's not that I'm saying psychedelics should be used at those ages. I believe that I might with my own kids, and I know that's controversial. Yeah. And when you look at communities or indigenous cultures like the Shipibo or the Bwiti, they start serving their children medicine around 12, 13 years old, right? They do rites of passage experiences, especially in different indigenous communities throughout Africa, where they have to go live in the bush on their own for 3 nights if you're 12, 13 years old. And if you come back and survive, you're now a man. And if you don't, they've accepted that as part of the culture. And this is something around rites of passage I think that we've gotten away from, is obviously fear-based culture bleeds into so many things, but including this. And Charles Eisenstein talks about this a lot. Until we stop putting safety as the top priority in our society, we're always going to crumble, because safety should not be the top priority. It's about our evolution. It's about our growth. It's about helping us self-realize that our boy is going through this transition into manhood. So we take on that radical and personal and self-responsibility, which kind of ties into the sovereignty and stuff. It's like when you have that rites of passage, when you break through that barrier, you are pillared in who you are in a way that makes you take on a sense of responsibility where I can no longer be victim to anything outside of myself. Those experiences are powerful, man. And going back to the relation of psychedelics, it's like, yeah, my first time I did 5 grams of mushrooms, I came out of that experience like, okay, I can no longer run from the confrontation that I've been living in an adolescence, even though I'm 31 years old. Yeah. And it opened up a whole journey of self-actualization, which allowed me to step more into what it means to be a safe, sovereign, free, powerful, grounded, strong man in this world.
What is up, family? I wanted to take a second while you're tuning in to tell you about an amazing new product I recently began using. Now, you guys know I do ads very rarely, and my promise to you is that anything I speak about is something I personally have found value in using regularly. Well, recently, I came across a company called Brain Supreme, who sells microdoses of mushrooms mixed with adaptogens, nootropics, and other additions as well. And even though I've microdosed off and on for years, I have never felt results like these. In only 2 weeks, I'm sleeping better, I have far less mind chatter, my ability to perform has exponentially improved, and best of all, the sense of inner peace I've been feeling is like nothing I've ever experienced in microdosing before. Right now, you can get 15% off of any of their products when you use code SPRAGUE15 at checkout. And to find out more about them and grab some for yourself, head down to the show notes for this episode and begin your journey into microdosing today. Now back to the show. Dude, 100%. And you know, it's so funny you mentioned potentially having psychedelics be an aspect of the rites of passage you bring your children through. And then when you mentioned it may be controversial, right? Like, think about the world we live in, that it's completely normal to inject your baby with a bunch of fucking vaccines made by the biggest cartel in the entire world, killed more people than anything, ever. That's completely normal. But giving your kid mushrooms that grow from the natural earth is somehow controversial, right? Like, that's why I don't mind being controversial, because controversial, in my opinion, in today's world, is actually common sense, because we're so ass backwards. Because the way that I like to look at life, because I just like easy ways to navigate things, is simplicity is the language of God, complexity is the language of the ego. So when you think about, right, the idea of these sacred medicines that have always been here, and us connecting with them the same way we have for over 10,000 years, right? Probably a lot longer than that. They're mentioned in the Bible. They're mentioned all throughout these texts before they got essentially institutionalized by man and started getting all the stories wrapped around his story and things like that. But again, like, if you can give a child, or not a child, but like an adolescent, these types of things, and they have a positive experience with them the same way we've been having for over 10,000 years, how is that not simplicity, right? Like, the way I look at it is like, if you think that the human body is innately flawed to the point where you have to put a bunch of random chemicals inside yourself just to exist in today's world, and you think that's normal, well, you are in the ego. That is the ego's world. Complexity, confusion, fear, that's all the ego's doing, And so when it comes to these mushrooms and these different types of medicines, they actually free you from those things. Now, the challenge is that a lot of times you got to go through whatever's the block in there, right? I was giving this analogy the other day. It's almost like you have a clogged drain, right? So for a week, your drain has been clogged. Well, if you unclog it, what's going to happen? All the shit's going to come out, right? Like shit that you didn't even know was in there because it's been a week that it's been clogged. Now let's think about 30, 40, 50 years, right? Yeah. So again, like, we know that we must feel things to heal them. And also in today's world, we've been convinced through mainstream society that somehow certain emotions are positive. Happiness, excitement, productivity is at the top of that list. But depression, sadness, anxiety, all these things are just pesky things to get away. They're not real, or they're not important. They're just random signals, and just numb those things out. They're not even worth it, right? When in reality, these medicines, they help you actually feel them fully so you can heal them. And so, again, I have no problem being a controversial person in the very sick world, and I imagine you totally identify with that too. And I think we're seeing a shift right now. I'm not a political person whatsoever, but in terms of entertainment, the show is great. And what I will say, though, is I have very much enjoyed the energetics of what I felt throughout the collective as like kind of a, kind of lumped together of Trump getting in, because it's more of like, no, there are two genders. Like, you can play whatever game you want, but there are two genders because we have to have some semblance of structure here in society for this thing to operate. If we start breaking down the foundation of what it even means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, we start to get further and further into what? Complexity, which is the world of the ego, which is not God's world, So again, it's just one of those things where I don't mind anymore being controversial, because I understand that there's your people and not your people. And why would I ever spend time trying to convince not my people to be my people when I could just spend that time with my people, And there's no harm, no foul, right? No judgment. Everyone's going to find their person. And if either of us are that for someone, great. If we aren't, great. No big deal.
Yeah. And you mentioned a good thing. It's like one of the guiding principles that have really changed my life and allowed me to ground my consciousness in reality and understand how to relate to this miracle we're living has been the Hermetic principles, Hermetic philosophy, right? Bro. And one of the 7 Hermetic principles is the principle of gender.
Yes.
And it's understanding how that plays out on a micro and macro level across individuals and all space and time throughout all universes. There's a masculine, feminine dynamic within me and within you and within this desk and within everything around us, right? And we're confusing identity with universal principles.
Yes.
I want you to be able to identify in whatever way makes you feel free and sovereign within your own belief systems, but not disrupting the very fabric of what reality is built on. And that this matrix we all live in, it's a collective matrix of all 8 billion of us, including all the sentient species, and this desk and walls are sentient as well. We can get into that topic, but you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And that collective matrix has a set of principles and rules that govern the entire existence of it. We can call that God, right? I believe that I'm a very big fan of the law of one and just the simplistic, non-dogmatic way those teachings come across of listen, everything is rooted in infinity. Infinity has these sets of principles that make itself exist. From there, be what you want. You have free will.
Exactly.
But we need to acknowledge the set of principles. And to me, I'm a big fan of Robert Edward Grant and a lot of his teachings and the way he props up Hermetic philosophy. It's like, I believe in the same notion he does, that these 7 principles are the underlining governing rules of existence. And once I started to embody those and I saw them in everything, it opened up my entire way of relating and seeing the world. It's fascinating, man. So it shouldn't be controversial that this is a thing. And I want you to identify in whatever makes you feel free. Both of those can exist. And we've gotten so far away, what you call complexity, so far away of the simplicity of it, that we're fighting over the fact that we're allowed to have differing perspectives. It's not right or wrong.
Yeah.
We're making meaning of things that don't need meaning made of them.
Yeah, dude. I'm so glad, dude. The Hermetic principles are my guiding light in life. They're the main system out of anything I've learned. I love Law 1. I love A Course in Miracles too. It's like these 3 things are my guiding principle. And that's what I meant when I said like this idea that there's 2 genders, right? Not that you can't identify as what you want to identify as, right? That's your free will as a human being. But exactly like you said, like whether you want to call it black and white, whether you want to call it positive and negative, whether you want to call it male and female, whether you want to call it positive and negative, whatever, it's like there are these 2 forces that everything is an amalgamation of, And so like where I get frustrated is when people that don't understand the game try overstepping the rules and then convincing other people that because their version of the rules gets them angry that another person can't say anything about it, right? It's like, no, like, hey, we can all play whatever game we want here. But at the same time, right, like to the degree you really believe something, you don't need to argue it with anyone, right? Like I have many, many transgender friends who are amazing. And they're the ones that told me this. They're like, listen, man, like, for us personally, this experience is not something we feel we need to go scream from the rooftops. It's a traumatic experience being brought into a body that you don't identify with and having to figure that out in the world. And so, again, like what gets me very upset is the fact that these movements are getting almost like, thwarted by people that just want the attention and things like that. And so like, again, it's like when you understand the Hermetic principles or any system that helps you just understand the natural laws of the universe, you can't help but see silliness everywhere. And you also can't help but laugh at it and not take it too seriously because that's also part of the ego's trap. It's part of its trap is to make you think all of this stuff is so real that you get triggered, you get angry, and then all those emotions come up and you get more into your ego self and you feel vindicated and all these things. And then you fall deeper and deeper asleep into the dream, And every time you realize that, oh man, like this thing I think I'm worrying about doesn't really matter, and you forgive that, you can side a little bit closer with God. And, dude, I can say this with you because you'll get it. But I say often that if there was one Hermetic principle that if the world embodied overnight, we'd wake up to a totally different world. It's number 2, the law of correspondence. As within, so without. How many people are like, he or she makes me upset. When they do this, I feel this way, right? Not realizing like, dude, you just are terrified of admitting that you need to take ownership over the fact that your emotions are your emotions alone. If you called me an asshole right now, but I don't believe I'm an asshole, I'll just laugh, right? I'll be like, that's hilarious. But if I do get upset, the ego's trap is, hey, they just wronged me. But the real gift they just gave you is, whoa, shit, where in myself do I resonate with me being an asshole? Because that's the only reason I got upset. So I can't even imagine what the world would look like if everyone woke up tomorrow perfectly embodied in that. I think about that often.
It's one of those sayings where people have heard it, but they don't get it. It's like the world is your mirror, literally. And so anytime I'm getting triggered, it has nothing to do with the person triggering me. All they are doing is presenting the mirror, showing myself where I'm not free. And anything that I desire to see more of in the world, if I'm not able to do that and give that myself first, I'm never going to see the thing I want in the world. Right. And so we project on others what triggers actually ours to take full ownership of. And then we also get victimized by the things we're not seeing in the world when we're not the one becoming of it. So as within, so without, as above, so below. Whatever I am, I'm going to attract and see in the world. If there's something I desire and I am not seeing in the world, it's my job and responsibility to become that thing. Mm-hmm. And this is most powerful in relationship. A lot of the work I end up doing with men end up always naturally going to relationships, because relationships are always showing us we're not free. Yeah. Right. And it's that principle. Number two, correspondence always comes in the loudest, because it's the projection of like, well, when she does this, I'm like, what's coming up in you? I get triggered because of this. I'm like, great. It has nothing to do with her. Take her off the table completely. If you're getting triggered by something, you're showing yourself that you're not free. You're not sovereign. You're not able and capable to handle something because you're being victimized by your own unconscious mind and systems of protectors that you've not built those relationships with yet. How powerful would you feel if she did the exact same thing you're blaming her for, and you were able to hold the space like a safe masculine, be in the chaos, and be pillared and centered to not be reactive to it at all? Mm-hmm. If you're in traffic getting frustrated over somebody cutting you off or what that, imagine how that little circumstance is being mirrored in the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Right. And that principle of mirror, it's like everything in this experience is mine. Even something I might be feeling in relationship. It's like when I open that space and container for my partner and I to have that discussion, I open it with, hey, I want to know this is all coming from love. Everything I'm saying and experiencing right now, I'm owning as my experience. I'm not putting this on you. And I want to make sure that you know this means nothing about you or our relationship. That gives us the ability to then step into truth. My truth is, this is what I'm experiencing. And because I can own that I'm experiencing it, of course it's being mirrored into the relationship. But because I can take ownership of that, I'm giving her an opportunity to give me a reflection I'm not conscious of because I'm not free of it yet. That's all Hermeticism, dog. Mm-hmm. And it's and you can do that about every single principle. It's like one of my favorite ones. I got it tattooed right here. The all is mind.
Yes, dude. Number one, bro.
Yeah. And it's that realization that everything is mind manifest, and everything that is mind manifest is rooted in belief systems. Mm-hmm. And if I can just know that's the truth, then go to principle two. Okay. If I know that everything I'm seeing is based on my own belief systems and creation, right? The mind creates, the heart manifests. The heart's going to manifest what your mind believes about itself. If my mirror isn't clean and I don't like the way it looks, coming back to one, that's why I like how they build on each other.
Yeah, dude.
Right? Like they're sequential and they teach them in order for a reason. I've read the Kabbalion probably 24 times at this point.
Yeah, dude.
Because it unlocks more and more for me. And it's sequential for a reason. It's like, okay, understanding that everything is mind manifest from my belief systems, how I see the world, what my programs, distortions, beliefs, triggers, traumas, protectors, all of that is creating this for me. Then you go to step two, just acknowledge that exists. Step two, oh, this mirror's clean. I don't like this part about myself. Back to step one, which one of these belief systems is the thing triggering this? And then you can go to step, and it's fucking fascinating, man.
Dude.
And that's why the ancient wisdom, the things that have carried themselves for 5, 6, 7, 10, 12,000 years, they're alive because they're rooted in truth. Mm-hmm. And so I don't need to listen to the professor at the university that graduated some Freudian shit that isn't even his teaching, and he's not embodying his own symbolism of what his truth is in life. He's rehearsing a book. It doesn't resonate as truth because it's not your truth. This does because it's fundamental to how truth operates.
Yeah, dude, perfectly stated, man. And it's just so awesome, dude. Like, I mentioned Hermetics to a lot of people, and most people just haven't heard of it, and I read the Kabbalion for the first time probably about 4 years ago, and was just like this. Like, again, like there's so many different systems out there, and a lot of them are great. I've trained in Kabbalah and, different mystery schools and whatnot, and they all have some cool stuff to them. But Hermetics was just, once again, it was like, dude, that is the simplest way. And also, just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy, Like it is the most challenging 7 fucking things you'll ever go through in your life. But like you said, I love things that I can learn and be like, oh, I get that. And then a month later, be like, I guess I didn't get that. Then 6 months later, be like, oh, I definitely didn't get it 6 months ago. And it just never stops, right? Like, sometimes I'll just mess around and ask ChatGPT for a synopsis of Kabbalion. And then I'll be like, say it differently. And I'll just see different ways that it puts it together and different ways that it can amalgamate different responses in me. And, I've loved the idea because if you think about it, right, like to me, being friends with Aaron and, hearing a lot about the Jesus way, I'm a huge fan of it. And one of my favorite books of all time, which, God, I think mention this in every podcast now. Sorry, listeners, but is Disappearance of the Universe. Have you ever heard of that before or read it?
No. I'm gonna write that one
dude.
down.
Austin, I think you're going to love it, dude, because when you actually hear like what Jesus was teaching, it's very hermetic, dude. Like it's very similar because basically like what they undo in that book is they're like, how like, Jesus is always depicted as this guy suffering on the cross. Like, dude, he wasn't suffering at all. Right. He chose to be crucified as his last forgiveness lesson because he realized that in order for people to believe that we're infinite beings, I'm going to have to pull off something really crazy. So I'm going to get killed in front of a bunch of people and then just hop into a new body and go knock on the door and be like, what's up? You missed me? And that's essentially what happened. The two ascended masters that come to the author of the book and start telling him stuff, they were Saint Thaddeus and someone else in Jesus's original disciples. And they talk about how like we all love Jay. They call him Jay in the book, which is so funny. I don't know why, but it just makes it so impersonal and like funny. Like he's a bro of yours, But dude, he was like the coolest, man. He was just going around being like, hey guys, like you don't need to do any of this kind of stuff. Just forgive, love your neighbor, love yourself, love your God. You're good. Like that's it. And he was also saying, hey, this is all a dream here. So don't make it too real, right? Have the best dream you can. But make sure like the way you have the best dream is not by diving deeper into the dream. It's by waking up in the dream to the reality of that which is not reality, which is this dream. The fact that we're dreaming, we are the dreamer, and that our lives intersect at the corner of free will and destiny, right? So we have infinite paths that we can go on, but only one is the greatest and grandest. And it's okay if you don't get it right. You got infinity to figure it out. And this is just really God experiencing itself. God experiencing, what if there was something else than infinity, right? AKA finiteness. And when that dream happened, the ego got created. And so this is the ego's world. And so the goal is, how can you utilize the ego to have a fun dream while not allowing it to take you over and let you forget who you really are, And so like when you think about the all is mine, when you think about taking accountability for your own emotions and things like that, it's really, to me, all speaking to the same idea that like what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking is not reality. Like when someone makes me mad out there, that's not what really happened. So can I just forgive myself for the belief systems that I created in myself, even if I wasn't consciously aware when I created them, I still did it. Can I take accountability and ownership over that and realize that I can just redo those belief systems and laugh at the whole thing, laugh at the fact that I ever believed that, laugh at the fact that I allowed it to allow me to think the dream was real, and then laugh at the fact that I can see a lot of other people that were just where I was, and I'll probably be there again, right? And just laugh at the entire thing and realize that through laughter, through forgiveness, through connection, we return to source and we return to God, And so that book really did a lot for me, man. That and Kabbalion are like my two books, And he's got 4 actually that are all amazing. So if you like the first one, dive into the other 3.
Yeah, I'm shocked I haven't heard about it, man. I'm going to buy that right when we finish this up.
Bro, it's all about A Course in Miracles. So it's basically if you've ever tried to read the course, it's iambic pentameter. It's kind of weird to read. It makes sense, but it's a little strange to read. But according to the Ascended Masters that helped Gary, the author, write this book, the course is the only unadulterated teachings of Jesus available. Like it's just straight Jesus. There's no Paul doing his Paulinian stupid shit in there. There's no, other scribes that decided to write their own things in there. It's really just Jesus. And so what they do is they kind of like state it in modern day language. And so when I was reading this book, dude, I have never had this happen. I've never gone through 4 books in a 2-week period. I could not put them down. Like there was a feeling inside of me of like, there's nothing more important than understanding what's in these books right now. And it was just like that feeling of like, oh my God, I knew it. Oh my God, I knew it. Oh my God, I knew it the whole time, dude. So I'm really excited.
Course in Miracles? Or this book?
Disappearance, because it's based on the course. I haven't read the full course yet, but like, again, when I was telling Aaron, because he's a course master, he had never read Disappearance. So I was telling him about it because the author's a little interesting, he's not everyone's cup of tea, but his books are really good. And when I was telling him about it, he's like, dude, that's literally the course. He's like, everyone that's told me about that book said that it's just like the best summary of the course said in the way that anyone can understand. It doesn't take like a really focused, person to go through the course for years to get it. You can get this in 6 hours after you read the book. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. The course is dense.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
going
dense.
through my second audible listen to it, and it's not easily grasped, but there's so much beauty and wisdom in it that you keep going through it anyway.
Oh, dude, you're a braver man than I have the real book. It's actually right there. You can see the red. I got the
Oh
red
yeah.
version. I don't know why, but I got the real book because I was like, Aaron was like, do not read that on audiobook. And I was like, okay. Because he's like, dude, it's so confusing. Like, you really want to like follow it. So I took his wisdom from it. I also work with his business partner, Mark Anthony Lord, who's also a really big course teacher. And with those two, plus Disappearance and his series of books, I feel like I have a really good jumping off point to fully dedicate myself to the course now. Because again, like, it just makes sense, dude. It's just easy, And when I read that book, I realized, oh, Jesus, Buddha, Plato, Lao Tzu, like all these guys were actually non-dualists. So they would have never said, don't ever connect with an intoxicant, because if you think it's bad, that implies duality and it makes the dream real. They would have been like, is it good or bad? Probably in the middle, because that's very hermetic, right? The middle way is the way, right? Thinking about rhythm and everything, like the goal is to find the center points. You don't get too high, you don't get too low, right? Because every reaction has a counteraction, right? So if you go to the side of the polarity, like smoking cannabis all the time, let's say, and you're doing that for a long time, you got to switch it totally back the other way to complete abstinence before you can finally find that middle ground. So after a little bit of swinging, you just start to realize, what if I just stay centered? Simple, not easy though.
Yeah, actually, got to give you a shout out, man. We've never talked about this in our conversations, but you changed my relationship with cannabis.
Oh, dude, thank you,
I started
bro.
smoking when I was 16. At that age, everyone's pretty unconscious.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I was a freshman at ASU, my roommate at the time, his parents bought this big ass 4-bedroom house right next to the campus in Tempe. So we were like a quarter mile from Mill Avenue, where all the parties were happening and everything. And we decided to share the master bedroom. And because it was this massive L-shaped room, and we'd throw parties every weekend. So we had blow-up mattresses in all the other rooms for our friends to sleep over. And when I think I was 19 at the time, every morning he'd come sit on my bed because I was by the window and start smoking a blunt before he went to school. So all of a sudden I'm waking up at 7:00 in the morning just to smoke a blunt with this kid if he's going to do it anyway. And that led to just like smoking every day, really unconsciously, absolutely using it for numbing throughout my 20s and the major injuries. I smoked my ass off instead of taking pain pills. And then I listened to your podcast with Aubrey one day, and I'm already doing medicine work at this time, but like so ignorant to my relationship with cannabis. And it like woke me up. I'm like, holy shit, I'm not treating this like I do any of the other medicines. What am I doing? And so I took a week off, and then I went into that next time smoking to like journal, like, what is my intention? What do I want to come up? How do I want to explore? Okay, what would happen if I put an eye mask on and actually laid still instead of smoking to watch TV or go stuff my face in the kitchen or distract myself, whatever it is. And it changed everything for me, dude. So want to give you that shout out while we're here, since that's your entire teaching anyway. You changed a lot for me when I heard that podcast.
Bro, that means the world, dude. Seriously. And, it makes a lot of sense now why that probably resonated with you, because how I talk about cannabis, I sometimes mention this on podcasts, but it's very influenced from Hermetic law. Like a lot of the things I talk about, like, hey, don't blame cannabis for your issues. Take ownership over the fact that you put that pipe or joint to your mouth. And until you take accountability for that, you're going to keep blaming everything external to you.
Yeah.
And I say often too that, it's like, why does your relationship with cannabis matter? On its own, it's not really that important. But what it represents, which is how we do anything is how we do everything, that's a very Hermetic way to look at life too. And that's what really matters, is that you can take any relationship in your life and utilize it as a mirror, like you mentioned earlier. And for a lot of people, if they're not in a sacred partnership or they don't have a romantic partner, and maybe they don't have any close friends, whatever, like that relationship is cannabis for them. And even for a lot of other people that do have a lot of those things, they maybe get too triggered when it's a partner or someone else that can, talk back at them. So I always tell people, like, a really safe way to explore relational patterns is with a plant like cannabis, because, if you get mad at it, it's not going to say anything to you. It's going to let you just stew on this thought. And eventually, if you have the awareness, you're going to come to the point of like, oh man, I'm blaming this plant. Plant didn't do anything. It's just growing in the ground, just wanting sunlight and water and nutrients. And here I am picking it and deciding to put it in a bowl and smoke it. And that's not bad, but if I'm not getting good results, I have to look at my own actions with it to really figure out, where are these things coming from, right? Like you said, with the all is mind, right? Like, what belief systems are at work when it comes to this dysfunctional pattern I have in any aspect of my life, let alone cannabis, right? So really glad that you said that, man. I'm super grateful, dude. Thank you.
Yeah, cannabis shows you, Rogan talks about this all the time, right? He's like, I'll have friends that smoke and they get anxiety. He's like, right.
Yeah.
It's trying to show you that you're already anxious.
Yeah.
You've gotten so good at gaslighting yourself. You walk through the day as if you're not that same anxious person, that it's just highlighted when you smoke a joint all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I've had to come to this realization. It's like, and this is a little bit esoteric, so maybe some of the listeners bear with me here, but when people overeat, a lot of people that are suffering from obesity, that's a mother wound, right? They weren't receiving the nurturing they did when they're young. So they overeat so they can feel anything, because they're expressing a lack of actually being able to tune in and nurture themselves. So they eat to the point that they're sick, which ends up leading to the obesity. And this is a lot of my girlfriend's teachings. But I noticed that when I smoke and I get the munchies, there is something I'm not wanting to feel. So I'm numbing that capacity to be stuffing myself to where the only thing I feel is the over distension of my belly because I couldn't stop eating. And when in reality, when I feel the munchies, if I get really still and I go into it, I typically end up having a big release. My channel opens. I have a creative flow that comes through. I tap into an emotion. I have a realization. I realize there's a truth and a hard conversation I'm running from. And so the symptomology, and I think this is true of everything in life, the symptomology, what our bodies are expressing are so pointed at what it's wanting us to look at. Anxiety is begging you to look at the emotions trapped in your body. Depression is begging you to look at the looping thought systems that are trapped in your mind, right? These things are actually really alluring signals that the universe has created that manifest into the physical form, telling us the exact part of ourselves that we need to be with, look at, heal from, speak to, whatever it might be, right? And cannabis, more than anything else, does that. So when I smoke, sometimes I get anxious. I'm like, shit, what am I ignoring right now? It's like, instead of running from it, go right into it.
Yeah. And you can transmute it doing that, right? Through alchemy, turn lead into gold. And, that's the thing is like, I don't judge anyone, because it took me a while to first of all, even just understand this. I mean, let's think of it, right? Like, I always say jokingly that if white bread is on the food pyramid, just imagine how fucked we are, right? Because it doesn't stop there, because how we do anything is how we do everything. So if we're as ass backwards as white bread being on the food pyramid, fluoride being in our water, and vaccines being safe to inject kids with, but don't give them mushrooms before they're 21. If we're in that world, then all bets are off, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, like, I don't discredit or judge anyone from falling into any pattern, right? Because I've had all of these, so that would just be silly and completely ego. But, the other thing too is that there will be a certain point where the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change. And, I think when that happens, it puts people at a surrender point where maybe they utilize the psychedelic medicine, maybe they go to therapy, whatever it is, where they start realizing that whatever problem of thinking they've created, they can't solve it with the same level of thinking. And that gaslighting themselves and all these things are not working, right? Like, the only way out is through, and like Joseph Campbell states, and again, like, I heard this quote for years and understood the idea of it, but until I experienced it firsthand, I didn't really understand how beautiful of a quote this is, which is, bliss is any emotion felt all the way through. Because just the same way that I mentioned, we think vaccines are safe, but mushrooms aren't, and all these kind of things, one of the other main things is that it just doesn't stop there, right? Like, it just keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. And at the end of the day, like, the quicker that we can wake up to these things, the quicker that we can eventually heal from them. And I just, that's my hope for the world. And I think that in that same type of line, one of the biggest ways in which we've been kind of, I don't know, blue pill in a way, I guess is the right way to say it, is with emotion, right? Like, into believing that, like, oh yeah, it's not just white bread's healthy in these things, but also like happiness, good, sadness, bad, right? Like, these kind of things, I mean, it even goes as deep, bro. I went down a rabbit hole one day, and I found the CIA experiment they had done. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but, like, I started to ask, like, what do I currently believe that I think is just objective that is actually completely false? And when you start asking those questions when you're on psychedelics, starts going pretty deep, right? And so I was connecting with cannabis and some mushrooms and decided to go on a CIA quest on ChatGPT. And I found this experiment they did in the 90s, I think, early 90s, where they took these senior citizens that were all different age ranges, like, 80s, 90s, all in varying conditions of failing health. Some were walking with walkers, some had Alzheimer's, like just different, diseases and conditions. And so they replicated a town, like they made a fake town basically, and they orchestrated it so that when it was done, it looked exactly like these people just walked into like the 1930s or something like that. Their mindset wise, like when they were in that, era, they were like in their like 20s, 30s, right? Maybe even a little bit younger, like early 20s, things like that. So when they put these senior citizens into this community, and I'm talking the houses, the cars, the TV programs, the furniture, the food, everything was exactly like it would have been back in like the late 20s, early 30s. And all of a sudden, they started watching these people regress in age. They started watching them not walk with walkers. They started watching people that had knee problems that haven't been able to sit in years, just sit down crisscross applesauce in front of the TV like they did when they were kids. It made me question, like, is the belief that we even get older and we have to die, is that just a belief? Like, are we just picking up unconsciously the fact that, like, oh, like, this gentleman's around 33, like I am, so this is, I guess, what you look like when you're 33. Like, is that even a foundational level? I mean, it gets really trippy when you start diving into that stuff, but it's pretty fascinating, dude. Because again, if the all is mind, aka if we're the creator of our reality, then there's no bounds to what that means, right? And that's like a hard thing for the human mind to comprehend. It's like trying to comprehend infinity. I can understand something that goes on forever and never was born and never ends, but I can't actually hold that in my little human self, So it's fucking fascinating, dude.
And again, you look at so many, the Bible, the Hermetic philosophy, the law of one. So many of these texts talk about 100 years is not the human life.
Yeah, exactly.
Typically in that like 700 to 900 year range, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, what is that about? What has convinced us that 100 years is the apex of what this human experience is? Because look at, I can't remember who posted this, but I know Rogan talked about it on his podcast. Look at actors from the 80s in their 50s. They look like they're dying. Mm-hmm. And then look at like Rogan and Cam Hanes and Huberman, these dudes in their 50s that are like apex species. Yeah. It's literally a different era. What has actually changed? Mm-hmm. Right? We eat relatively the same food, and that's a whole different conversation, but reality hasn't changed. It's the way that we're relating to our own reality that we can recreate our belief systems, that I can be healthy at any age. And then naturally you draw yourself to the things that prove yourself correct, because your belief system is going to manifest outwardly what I believe to be true about myself and the world. Mm-hmm. So it's not an accident that you have people in their Mark Sisson. Mm-hmm. He's another one. The dude's like 70 something and he's jacked and shredded. It's like, what? Paul Chek. We can go on and on, right?
Paul Chek. Yep.
Paul Chek's going to be 260 years old by the time he dies. Like he's rewriting all of this.
I mean, bro, you even look at like Vince McMahon, right? The guy from the WWE, right? So we're talking about like health conscious people. Vince McMahon's on steroids, whatever. But dude is like 70 something and still yoked, like still, I mean, up until recently running the WWE, I think there's some controversy. I don't pay attention to it, but I think what it is, man, is that I think Hunter S. Thompson kind of got it, a little bit. Obviously, there's definitely I don't know, I feel this may be a belief too, but I feel like there's a cutoff point to this, what I'm about to say, but within reason. Like, when he said the point of life is not to show up at the grave with a perfectly pristine body, it's to slide in sideways yelling, "What a fucking ride." Like, now again, someone could be like, oh, let me just do drugs and drink. Like, that's where I say the cutoff is. But like, if you find something you're passionate around, right? You talk about Rogan, Chek, even Vince McMahon, right? Like, what is the common denominator? They do things that they love. They do things they love, and they move their fucking body, right? Like, you listen to Paul Chek, you even listen to Rogan, I'm sure Vince McMahon, definitely. They haven't had like a perfectly pristine body. They've gone through injuries. Paul had a guy fall on his neck and snap 3 of his vertebrae. He's had a concussion that knocked him out for 2 weeks at a time off a, dirt bike accident. And dude just didn't let that stop him. But on the other hand, I have very close family members that had a lot of trauma That manifested as back problems or whatever else. They went to a doctor and the doctor said, you have this disorder called degenerative disc disease. That's all you can do. So they went home and tried to be careful and they just fucking annihilated themselves. So I really think, dude, and like it's been my experience too. Now, if you break a bone, that's one thing. But like when I pull muscles or whatever, I've just learned to just work out through them. Now, again, I'm not going to PR if I have like a fucked up shoulder, but I'm not going to stop working out. Every time I've tried to stop working out for that, it shot me in the foot. And I never want to stop working out. Like I love it. It's like one of my, favorite things to do. So when I look at Rogan and all these people, they just keep moving, dude, and they do things that matter to them. They have family and things like that. Of course, all that matters. But I think specifically, like, maybe this is the same for women. I'm not going to try to speak to women because I think it gets us in a lot of trouble. But for men anyway, like doing something you love and having a passion and a mission, I think is the most important thing you can possibly have because it's connection to self. So that's my best guess,
Yeah, I think that's to the design of the masculine energy is freedom and purpose. If we can have those two things, we are living in alignment of how to show up within ourselves. Just like women, they want connection and safety.
Yeah.
And when they feel connected and safe, then their channel explodes. When we feel free and on purpose, our channel explodes. And then from that place, we can create whatever we want. We're in the creator archetype. And I think you mentioned something really important to note. That is wrong with all of current allopathic Western medicine. I'm talking therapy, I'm talking pharmaceuticals, I'm talking with the whole wanting to cut before any other their medicines, is they make individuals identify as the thing they're experiencing, which then that roots in a new belief system. So you have degenerative disc disorder, which means by definition, this, and this. And so that individual thinks, okay, my life's fucked now. And it's like, how about the guy that it was a few years, the story was going around. He ended up breaking his neck and was paralyzed from the neck down. And over a 2-year period, took a shit ton of psilocybin mushrooms with the intention on going into each journey, teaching his body how to operate again, like rewiring the belief systems that said he was going to be paralyzed. And now he's a professional BMX rider, like an off-road, like trail bike. I don't know the technical term, but he's like a professional off-trail bike rider.
God damn.
And he retrained his belief systems that it is not correct. He's going to be paralyzed forever. Fuck everything the Western medical system is telling him. And now he's living out what he loves and wants to do because he changed the rooted belief systems. And so this is why I get so frustrated when people identify with, like, I have ADHD. No, you don't. You're experiencing symptoms that we have named ADHD because between the ages of 3 and 7 years old, your young self experienced something traumatic when your medulla oblongata was developing, which is your attention center. And so you trained yourself how to be addicted to distraction at that age because it was the only way to keep you safe.
Coping strategy.
And if anybody's wanting more information on that book, read Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate, right? Yeah. If we don't identify with these things, I'm not depressed. I'm experiencing states of depression. I don't have anxiety. I'm having an anxious moment. Then everything becomes a teaching because it's momentary. And anything that's momentary is an experience. And anything experience is a finite. And anything that's finite, you can learn from. If you can learn from it, you're evolving. If you're evolving, you're doing exactly what you were put on earth to do. And so, like, stop identifying with these things because they're changing our belief systems, which is why I don't believe I'm going to die at 100. And I don't care how wild it sounds. I'm going to live to 200. And if I truly
same thing.
Align with that belief system, but it's like, do that everything. I'm abundant. This is why I am statements are so powerful. Right? So true, I am all of these things and I'm taking ownership that I am these things. And so I think it's a really important note because this is what I think is wrong with I can go on so many tangents on this. One of the things that's entirely wrong with Western medicine.
Yeah, dude. Bro, I mean, I think we just became best friends, bro. Hermetics, all these things, dude. I think we officially have bunk bed status now. Step brothers moment. Dude, it's so true, man. Like, it's so interesting looking into the world because I'm humble enough to realize my own, distortions and things that I've experienced, right? When I see other people going through things. But at the same time, I am so vehemently against those things now because of where they led me. Like, I'm grateful I went through it, but I wouldn't choose to go back there. Like, I learned that lesson. I'm moving forward. So, like, I've just found myself just kind of escaping the world, right? And what I mean by that is, like, just tuning out. Obviously, the news was a long time ago, but even tuning out, like, podcast, trying to get off social media, like just leaving myself a clean slate because I don't want to unconsciously pick up on anyone else's myths that I don't like. Like it was funny on that Danny Morell episode. Someone was commenting, it's very weird, dude, in the way the resurgence of Jesus and the people that are obsessed with Jesus right now, because they're, I was talking to Aaron about this. Like, yeah, sure, they believe in Jesus, but they don't follow anything he says. And then they try to reprimand you for being like, Jesus is the only way. And it's like, Jesus would never say that. He was a non-dualist. You literally don't get it, And so like on everything I talk about with cannabis on a spiritual podcast, there's got to be at least 3 people like, Jesus is the only way. He died for your sin. I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about. You're literally rephrasing Paulinian shit that wasn't even Jesus' writings. So, it's interesting because there's a part of me that so wants to go in there and just be like, well, who created cannabis if everything is God, right? So why is this any different, right? But again, not my place. And also like, there's nothing wrong they're doing. Like that could be exactly what they need for their evolution right now. So I don't want to go messing with people's karma and whatnot, but it's just like, I see those things and I'm like, man, I remember those days that I was so boxed in, like, this is the only way. I remember literally being 18 years old and arguing with my friends about why metal music was better than rap. Like really like just thinking I was so vindicated and just like, no, I know it's better. And thinking back and being like, oh, facepalm, like that was a yikes moment, And so when I see it now, it reminds me of my own, limitations that I put on life, like I love rap now and metal. Like, I was like, why does it have to be one or the other? That's a psychedelics teacher. They're like, yes, and instead of, like you can have both, dude. You can have your cake. You can eat it too, and that cake can be gluten-free. You can get all 3, So
yeah, I've been playing with this thing lately that keeps coming through, and it's like the more I play with it, the more I'm starting to realize how true it is. And it's the like when you what pinged me is when you said that people make the comments like this is the only way, right?
Yeah.
And who also comes into my field when I think about this is the man himself, Peter Crone.
Dude, that guy
love that dude's teachings, man. He is so pointed in how it's delivered. And one of his quotes, like, words don't describe reality, they're creating your reality, and really being with that. And then I took that to the next level for my own journey and starting to understand that everything we are speaking is our unconscious mind wanting us to listen to ourselves. Again, so that mirror thing, this entire experience is just me. So everything I'm speaking is my own unconscious mind wanting me to listen and relate to myself with it. And so if somebody's speaking, this is the only way, that is painting the framework of how they see their lives in reality. And by trying to get you to understand that this is the only way, they've just created their own box, which is why they're going to be trapped in it forever. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk, I'm listening to the words I speak much more intently, realizing that I'm just witnessing myself talk. I'm not the one actually speaking. So putting everything from the seat of the observer. And then same thing with thoughts. Thoughts are not real. They're ethereal. This is why journaling is powerful, is because when you alchemize these thoughts into the universe and you make them real, you get to understand them at a new level. You can make sense of them. You can interact with them. So people that are just dying in the swirling mind of your own thoughts, just write that shit out. It's going to change everything for you. And I used to think I was the one thinking my thoughts. And so it's like when I learned to take a step back and realize I'm listening to my thoughts, I'm listening to my unconscious pushing these things out in a way that we assume our brain is creating these chemical signals that we can, and it always feels like it's happening here, but we don't really know. It's just our best guess. I'm just listening to this shit happen. Yeah. Right. And so when I notice myself say something that's so limiting, instead, this is the only way, I'm like, oof, how is that showing up in my life? Yeah. Right. When I judge somebody, that's just me judging myself, my own unconscious projecting on somebody else, something that I actually don't like about myself that I haven't come to the realization of. So yeah, like, and it's funny too, because Danny is very anti-religion, but in his comments, you'll have so many people that are like the pro-Jesus movement. It's like, so funny, wait, what's happening here?
It's so funny, dude. It's so funny.
Yeah, and it's that's where that compassion comes in, is when I see some comments or people judging something I say, I'm like, man, I just realize and understand that is their own conscious, hoping one day they can see themselves in that own reflection, and in that is your freedom. But it's fascinating. It's like, the more I can take a seat back and just observe everything happening, the more I realize that it's all just me happening. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it sucks because I'm like, I'm sick of this shit, dude. I don't want to take responsibility for this one. But
No,
like,
dude.
it's also inescapable when you can see it. And it's the psychedelics help, we'll just put it that way. They help me kind of ground everything, realize it and ground it back in.
100%, dude. I totally agree, man. Like, one of the areas that I've really realized this in my own self, and this is like something like a idea I had recently while connecting with cannabis, is that, back when I was 20, all the way up until when I was about 30, actually probably like 28, but a couple of the things left over until I was 30. I was really into the David Goggins mentality. I didn't know about him until I was probably like 24, 25, but that kind of mentality of like, no pain, no gain, just work harder, discipline, discipline, discipline. And what I realized is that actually, in a way, just saying you're going to do something every day is the easy way. And I'll tell you why, right? Because let's say exercise, for instance, right? I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm not saying that's easier than not going to the gym at all. That's level one. But level two, which I think people think is or I'll make it personal, I thought was the final destination, is just do it every day, right? Never skip a day. But what happens with the relationship you have with intuition? What happens if you have a certain plan for your workout and your shoulder kind of feels weird? Are you going to still do that exact same plan? Or are you going to modulate it? If you've been going to the sauna 5 days and you wake up and you feel really dehydrated, are you going to just thug it out and get in there because I do this every day? No, it's actually the third level to this is being completely intuitive, getting off all the isms, right? Carnivore, vegan, I don't know, probably somewhere in the middle. I'm going to feel how my body feels and go with that. Whatever my body responds to, that's how I'm going to navigate life. I'm not going to create these disciplines that actually are not as good as I think they may have been in the past, because a lot of times they got me into hot water. Because at a certain point, there'll be days where if you don't flow with the flow of life and you try to paddle upstream, it's not sustainable because it requires effort. And effort by definition is not sustainable because it requires energy. And I don't care how strong-willed you are. Even look at David Goggins. He did it for a long time. And then by the end, he was like, fuck, I think I need to stretch. And then he realized stretching is what fixed what he thought was a brain tumor. I see a lot of masochism in those type of rituals, I guess you could call them, right? Like the no pain, no gain, just discipline yourself harder and harder. And I think it's it did serve me up until a certain point. If you're not fulfilling your responsibilities, if you're being lazy or couch potato or whatever, again, polarity, right? If you're not doing anything, you got to do everything before you can come back to something, so it's very interesting, man. But that's one I've noticed recently, last couple of years.
What's coming through is it's just the antithesis of what most of us should do, which is nothing.
Yeah, dude. Do whatever you want to do. What actually gives you joy. That's what kids do, and they're the closest to God, right?
Well, not from that sense. Not from a following, your dharma and your intuition that leads you to purpose and your freedom in that sense. But this whole pain, no gain, drive, effort, motivation. Let's just go, go, go. Doesn't matter. Most of us actually need to just do nothing a lot more.
Yeah. Subtract rather than add.
I don't give a fuck if you're working out 4 hours a day and putting in 12-hour work days and you're doing the grind. If you can't sit still for 45 minutes a day, and this is my own unconscious telling me I can't sit still for 45 minutes a day every day. I meditate every morning and night. Sometimes those are 30 seconds because I'm in and out and I'm so resistant to it. I commit to sitting down. I don't commit to how long I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
Right. And it's difficult. And it's like that David Goggins mentality that's been so pushed out into the culture. I think what happens is we need to get a little bit more Buddhist with it. Can we just be? Actually, the word I have really enjoyed playing with lately is contemplation. And one of my favorite books, it's always one of my top 5 recommended books to anybody I start working with, is The Art of Contemplation by Richard Rudd. And even Richard Rudd himself, for those who don't know, wrote the Gene Keys, which is the absolute fascinating map of understanding self and how to relate to self. I use the Gene Keys to make a lot of decisions in my life, especially in business. 2 of my shadow Gene Keys on my life's work and my life's purpose, so naturally those kind of fit into the business realm, are impatience and greed. And so many of my decisions in business, I tune in first. Am I being impatient with this decision? Am I being greedful in this decision? Right. So Gene Keys, powerful book, dictates so much of my life and relationship and relating. And even Richard Rohr was like, that book doesn't mean shit for what it's going to do to change your life compared to the art of contemplation. And it's like, are we able to just be with what is in a waking relative relation to it? I call it attunement, right? I think awareness is really overused. Awareness is very observational. It's very passive. I think what we need to do better, I need to do better, what I'm constantly working at doing better is being more attuned. And attuned is taking awareness and making it relational instead of observational. Attunement is taking awareness and making it interactive instead of passive. Right. And from that frame, we start to build an understanding and relationship with everything happening in our experience, including the present moment. And so for a lot of people that struggle with meditation, I do. I've been meditating for 6 years. I'm still shitty at it, which I think is actually the point. I find contemplation to be a lot more powerful because it's permission to be interactive with what's happening in my mind, in my awareness, in my field, in my emotions, in my discomfort, in my body, because that's the whole point of what meditation is trying to make you do as well, is be so hyper attuned with what is present that you notice these things. So I love Goggins. I think he's entertaining. You talk about entertainers. Sometimes we're just watching this movie unfold. Holy shit, is he a character?
Dude, and a badass too, man. I mean, like, dude,
badass.
Like give credit where credit's due. Like the dude is an absolute savage, bro. Like
his story of running like 36 miles when he had an abscess in his knee and it was actively pussing every time he took it. I'm like, I could never. Yeah. Thank God there's people out there like that. But David, when was the last time you were able to just sit for 45 minutes?
Yeah, dude. When's the last time you got a hug, dude?
Principal rhythm, man. Like, like you're saying, we need both. We need to find a way to include both aspects of those dynamics in our life.
Dude, awesome. This has been amazing, man. We got bunk bed status already. I got to get you back on for round 2, 3, etc. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you and tune into your epic world, dude? Because you got so many amazing things on the horizon. You got so many things you do. And you're such an amazing beer as well. You have a lot of just amazing wisdom, man. And, you have really good energy, man. So I know a lot of people are going to grab this podcast and want to connect with you. So where can I send them to find everything that is Austin West?
Yeah, my website and my Instagram handle, easiest ways. And they're both the same. I am Austin West. So that's the handle and the website.
Dope, dude. And I ask a final question to all guests I have on the show. You up for it?
I'm up for it.
All right, dude, let's send it. So let's say someone listens to this episode and they're really excited to check out psychedelic medicines and see if they apply to their own life. What is the one piece of advice you would suggest to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in figuring out whether these medicines are right for them right now in their life?
Discerning if it's right for them in their life now. I think that there's not a right or wrong time. I think that psychedelics, when used in intention, are always right. I think the intentionality and the readiness of confronting your truth is what you need to be discerning of. It's always the right time if your intention and readiness for truth is available for you. And that's where the discernment comes in. If I am in a depressive place where I feel like life is collapsing around me, this is not the time to go on a psychedelic journey. Right. But if I feel like I'm capable of handling more and opening up to aspects of myself that I know exist, but I have not attuned to build that relationship with self yet, that's a beautiful time to do it. So the discernment of where you are in life, timing is always there, man. There's always the right time for these things. So it's a readiness of intention and readiness of truth. And then if you can come to that term and open yourself up, these things will find you.
Dude, that may be my favorite answer I've ever gotten. Very hermetically said, man. And I really appreciate that, dude. Recognized game, bro. Because that totally is it for me. Like I've never thought of it that way. And that is exactly how I would state it. If I had to think about how I've ever thought about the concept of whether or not psychedelics are right, it's exactly what you said. They're always right. It just depends on where you're at and what you're looking to really open up right now. It depends on where you're at. That will determine if we could put the duality term of right or wrong on it, because they're always right. They're always there. They're just stationary, and they're always going to do something similar. They're going to alter your consciousness. But what is the degree to which you're okay with that happening and not being attached to anything you think is you, and opening up to truth and not trying to grip too hard, because that's when shit gets weird, right? Let's just be real, right? Like when you white knuckle in psychedelics, yeah, not fun. No. So good. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, go give Austin West a follow. This guy is absolutely epic. I've had so many people come on the show, and I don't think I've ever had anyone that has done at least as much research into Hermetics as he has. It's very challenging finding people that know about it. And so if you haven't checked it out, definitely check out Hermetic Law, see if it resonates as much as it does with Austin and I. But go give Austin a follow. If you love the show, go give us a 5-star review. If you haven't already, I'm looking at you. And until next time, may the source be with all of you to infinity and beyond in the wise words of Buzz Lightyear. Peace for now.